Hi, I'm Susan Kennedy of Pretty Peaceful, and it's a beautiful November day here in Southwest Colorado. It's my dog Rosie back there, frolicking in this beautiful dry grass. And today I want to show you my Pretty Peaceful Poncho. I just finished this and I love it. I've really been enjoying wearing it. It is a super easy beginner poncho crochet pattern. Doesn't get much easier than this. It's all double crochet stitches in US terms. So very easy. And this pattern is designed to use one of my favorite yarns that I love this one, Lion Brand Mandala. This is a DK weight category 3 yarn, DK weight. And this one is a bonus bundle. This is the equivalent of 2 of the smaller cakes. So you can use regular Lion Brand Mandala cakes, you can use bonus bundles. This color here is called Satyrs. And this color here is Bowser. And the one I used here in this poncho is called Golem. And I just really love this pink, purple. And what's kind of cool is that if you use a bonus bundle, then the stripes are kind of like broad and gentle. If you use 2 smaller cakes, then the stripes come a little bit more quickly. This one I believe is the werewolf color of Lion Brand Mandala. So I used just over 2 cakes for this version. And this is how it's made. It's double crochet back and forth in rows, very long rows. And then we just fold it in half when we're done. And we don't sew anything. We actually crochet the seam, which is here. I left my yarn attached so I can use it to sew the seam here. So we're gonna just crochet from here to about here, and we're gonna leave this open. And that's what creates the neck hole. So it's very simple construction. It's just got this one neck hole, and otherwise it's just that long piece folded in half to make this comfy poncho. And what I like about this is that it's warm on your shoulders and your neck, but you don't get too sweaty in the underarms. So it's nice. It's a little breezy, but you're still warm. So it's perfect for weather like today where it's kind of fall. So this would be a great gift to make for people for Christmas. It's pretty fast, however fast you can just double crochet through 2 cakes for medium size, just about 2 cakes for medium size, and more cakes for the bigger size, but very relaxing. Once you get that first row done, easy sailing, just double crochet back and forth. You don't even have to turn very often. And I made a tutorial video that's going to follow this. If you're a beginner crocheter, you can follow along with that. And if you're an experienced crocheter, you probably don't need to watch the whole video. And I made 2 charts to show you how many stitches to double crochet in each row and then how many rows. So the first chart, and these are both in the free pattern PDF on Ravelry. It's called Pretty Peaceful Poncho. So you can go download that free PDF and print it out, or I'll try to put the charts in the video description on YouTube. So the first chart is a size chart. And this shows all the sizes I worked out here from extra small to 4X. And the chest measurements they fit in inches and centimeters. These are using the Craft Yarn Council of America standards. That's kind of the standard sizes for garments for like crochet magazines in the US. So we're using those standard sizes. And then the finished size, this is the finished size of the rectangle that you're done before you fold it in half. And then the amount of yards or meters of yarn required. So the extra small and small sizes, you'll need about 2 cakes. You'll have a little bit left over. The medium size, depending on your cakes, you might be able to get a medium out of 2 cakes. This one took me 1 bonus bundle, and I even had a little bit left over here. Tiny little bit left over. But this version with the 2 cakes actually took me a little bit more than 2 cakes. So I've written that a little extra into the pattern here. And then the second chart shows the size, the number of starting chains for your first row, and then the number of stitches per row. And in the video, I'll show you how to get started using the chains, and then I'll also show you how to get started using foundation double crochet, because that's what I always use. It's so much easier than crocheting into chains. And then the number of rows you have to complete total. So if you're making the smallest size, you'll need to work 41 rows. If you're making the largest size, you need to make 51 rows. This one here is a medium. It's 45 rows, and I usually wear a large or extra large top because my shoulders are kind of broad, but according to the Craft Yarn Council of America, I'm a medium, so I made a medium here. And honestly, there's a lot of overlap in the sizes. I'm giving sizes to be respectful of everybody's beautiful bodies, but there's a lot of give here, so this would fit someone who wears extra large shirts like me, even though it's a medium. So, a little spin for you. I'll show you how to get started on the tutorial video, and that will include how to join a new cake whenever you come to a knot or have to add a new cake, and then also sewing the seam. And I'm going to sew the seam of this one here to show you how it's done. I keep saying sewing, but we're not sewing. It's actually just crochet, slip stitch to join the seam. So I'll show you how that's done. And it's a super easy poncho, pretty peaceful poncho. I hope you enjoy it. And happy crocheting. Okay, now let's take a look at how to crochet the Pretty Peaceful Poncho. So this is the finished poncho here, and if we zoom in and take a look at the stitch, it is just regular old double crochet in US terms, back and forth in rows, and the number of stitches you'll need depends on the size you're making. So here's the size chart from the free pattern on Ravelry, the Pretty Peaceful Poncho. So these are the standard sizes from the Craft Yarn Council of America. So measure around the bust, or you can kind of go by these sizes. So I'm 38 inches around the bust, and I'm making a medium size here. And this will show you the finished size after blocking, and then the yards or meters of yarn required. So for the medium size poncho I'm going to show you, it is going to require 2 cakes of Lion Brand Mandala plus a little bit more, a bit of a third cake. So choose the size you'll make, and then that will tell you how many starting chains you'll need to start your first row of double crochet, and how many stitches you should have in each row total. So we're going to begin our first row by making a row of chains, and we'll double crochet into the 3rd chain from the hook. And we're not going to count those skipped chains as a stitch, so this is the number of stitches you'll have at the end of each row for each size. Same number of stitches throughout the whole project in each row. Hopefully don't drop any or add in any extra ones. And then to get to the dimensions, this is the number of rows you're going to complete. So I'll show you how to get started. We're going to be using our DK weight yarn here. I'm using the color Werewolf of Lion Brand Mandala. It's really kind of earthy and pretty. I love the pinks, and I wear these a lot, but I also wear a lot of earth tones, so I'm excited to wear this one too. And because this pink one was in a Lion Brand Mandala bonus bundle, the striping is like a lot wider. And you'll see I did a little bit of test in this werewolf color here. The stripes come a lot faster, so more narrow stripes when you use the regular cakes opposed to the bonus bundle. So we're going to start with our 5mm hook. I'm using my Clover Amore hook that I really love. And I like to start with a dark color, so I'm going to start with the dark gray from this one here. And there are two ways you can start a row of double crochet. One way is to make a row of chains first, like I just listed in that chart there. And the other method is to do a foundation double crochet. And that's generally the way I prefer, but I'll show you both ways here. In case you're new to crochet, if you're not new to crochet, you could probably just take a look at this chart and the free printed pattern PDF on Ravelry, and you could probably just go from here without me having to show you anything. So feel free to go to Ravelry and download that. And I'm going to start the kind of beginner way by making a row of chains first, and then I'll show you the faster way of foundation double crochet. So to start, we put a slip knot on our hook. So the way I do that, I make a little loop. I grab a little bunny ear over here, and I make it jump over that loop and under around the back. And I keep pinching that little bunny ear and pull both ends, and there you have your slip knot. That's how I do it. A lot of different ways to make a slip knot, I found. Okay, now we're just gonna make some chains. So we're got our crochet hook and our dominant hand, the yarn's going over under, and we're just gonna grab the yarn, pull it through. That's one chain stitch. So yarn over, pull it through, yarn over, pull it through. So we're gonna keep making chains until you get to the required number of chains for the size you're making. So if you're making an extra small, you would make 204 of these, counting like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you're making the medium, like I am, you'd start with 224 chains. So just keep going. Try not to make them too tight. You want to be able to get your hook back in there when you're making the next row. So, you know, it's one of those things that takes some practice, is getting your chains to come out in even size. That's really frustrating. But there is an easier way that I'll show you in a minute. But if you're doing this chain method, whenever you've made the correct number of chains for your size, we're going to double crochet into the third chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3. So this one right here. So we're going to yarn over, put the hook into that chain, yarn over again and pull it through the chain, yarn over, pull through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over again and pull through the last 2 loops on the hook. So right there, this little column, that's our first stitch, and we're going to do that in each of the chains on down the line. Yarn over, hook goes into the chain, yarn over and pull it through the chain, yarn over and pull through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through 2 loops on the hook. Now I've got 2 stitches, and the skipped stitches I don't really count as a stitch because they're just kind of small, and we just want to count the nice big stitches we're making here. So we've got like these 3 kind of columns. Those are our 3 stitches so far. And you would just keep going on down the line. The first row is always the hardest. Takes some time because you're crocheting into these little chains. But, you know, every row comes to its end. So you could just take it, keep going like that. Double crocheting into each chain all the way down on the end, and then by the end of that row you would have the number of stitches listed on the chart here. So for the medium size, I'm going to have 222 stitches. Now I want to show you the other way to start, because it's the way I start things if I can every single time. I don't like crocheting into chains. I think it's really slow. So I start with a slip knot on my hook. And we're going to do a foundation double crochet, and it's just a way to make the chains and the first row of double crochet at the same time, which is very convenient. It starts with just 3 chains, and now we're going to insert our hook into the first chain we made, and we're going to act like we're doing a double crochet. So we're going to yarn over, insert the hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull it through. So it's starting just like a regular double crochet stitch, but here's where it's different. We're going to make a chain right in the middle of the double crochet stitch. Chain 1, and I like to pinch that chain that I just made, and then we're just going to finish the double crochet stitch like usual. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So we made a double crochet stitch, but we also made this chain that I'm pinching here. So now we're going to do it again. That was 1 foundation double crochet, and we're going to do the second one. Yarn over, insert the hook into the chain that you just made, that hopefully you were just pinching. Yarn over and pull it through. So got a little extra there. Chain 1, pinch the chain, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So this is how you foundation double crochet. Crochet into that chain you just made, make an extra chain 1 halfway through the stitch there, and then finish the double crochet as usual. So now we've got our starting chain 3 that we're not going to really count, and 1, 2, 3 foundation double crochet stitches, and they each have their little chain down at the bottom that we made right in the middle. So yarn over, go into the last chain you made, chain 1, pinch it, finish the stitch. Yarn over, go into that chain you made, chain 1, finish the stitch. And so your thumb and your middle finger on your left hand are pinching that chain you just made, so you know exactly where you're going into the next time. And I'm so grateful to have learned this. I learned this from Tamara Kelly at moogly.com, mooglyblog.com, who was a wonderful teacher. And thank you, Tamara, for teaching me this and allowing me to share it with other people, because it's such a useful technique. I find my first row looks a lot neater, and it's like the appropriate size. Because sometimes when you start with a row of chains, it can look bunched up, or it can get wavy if you don't have the tension just exactly right. So this foundation double crochet method, I feel, is just so helpful to make things look really crisp and clean and professional right at your starting row. So here, if we count these, we're just counting little columns here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So you keep going if you're foundation double crocheting, keep going until you have the number here listed on the chart for your size. And then we're just going to go back and forth for rows after that. The hard part's over of making row 1. So after you've gotten to that number of stitches, then we're going to turn our work and we're going to start the next row. And just like starting the first row, there are several different ways to do this to make the first stitch. You could chain 3 and either double crochet into this one or double crochet into that one next. And count this as a stitch or not count it as a stitch, depending on like the look you want. You just have to be consistent with what you're going to do row to row. So if you're going to do a chain 3 and count it as a stitch, then don't crochet into that one next to it. Crochet into this one here. And when you're counting your stitches, count this as a stitch and crochet into it on the next row. That's one way to do it. It does look a little weird though, this little chain hanging off of it. So I don't actually ever do that way. I prefer to do a chainless starting double crochet instead. So I'll show you how to do that. It just looks so much neater. And it just gives you nice sides on the blanket. So I'll show you what it looks like on my poncho here. This is what the edge looks like if you do the chainless starting double crochet. I think it's pretty nice and even. So I'm going to show you how to do it this way because it's just less gaps than when you chain 3. So to do a chainless starting double crochet, you pull up a bit of a loop here that's about as tall as the stitch is going to be. And then you put your finger on top of this loop here and wrap the hook like you do this. You're wrapping the loop around the hook like that. So we're pulling up the loop, finger stays on top. The hook will come towards you and wrap around. And then we're going to insert it into the very first stitch. Yarn over and pull through the stitch. And now look, it looks like we've got 3 loops on our hook, just like a regular double crochet stitch. So we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Yarn over and pull through 2 loops. So now we just made a stitch out of thin air, and it's nice and lined up with the last stitch. So I'm going to show you how to do that one more time. And you can always just chain 3. This is kind of a more advanced method, but I feel like it's worth it. So we're just starting our row. We're going to pull up a loop, finger on top, wrap the yarn around the hook, insert the hook into that very first stitch, yarn over and pull through the stitch. And now we've got kind of 3 loops on the hook. The middle one looks like 2 loops kind of because it's the wrapped one. Then we yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And then we made our chainless starting double crochet stitch. So I like to start my rows with that. Takes a little practice to get it right, drawing up the hook of the loop of the right size in the beginning. But I think it's well worth it. And again, thank you to Tamara Kelly at Moogly. Gotta respect my lineage of teachers, just like in yoga. She taught me a lot of what I know about crochet, and I'm very grateful to Tamara Kelly of mooglyblog.com. She's really great. So then we'll just double crochet into each stitch along the row. And this is a little scrap sample here, but you would have either 202 for the extra small, 212 for the small, 222 for the medium, 232 for the large, 242 for the extra large, 252 for the double X size, 262 for the 3X size, and 272 for the 4X size. So I've come to the end here, and I'm not going to crochet into this starting chain 3. I don't usually count chain 3s as stitches, so that row is done. We're going to turn our work, and I'll show you that chainless starting double crochet again. You pull up a loop like about the size of a row, wrap the yarn around the hook, insert the hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull it through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, including that weird kind of wrapped one, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. There's our chainless starting double crochet. And now, you know, you can just bliss out back and forth in rows. And yes, they are very long rows, but that's great. Then you don't have to do so much turning and chaining or chainless starting double crochet. You can just kind of be like, isn't this great to have a project to work on where we don't have to think about it too much, and it's going to keep us warm and cozy. So that row is just like all the other rows we're going to do here, just all double crochet. And you can stop when it's tall enough for you, like how tall you want your poncho to be, anywhere between 41 rows and 51 rows, depending on what size you want to make. And of course, you can make yours more cropped if you want, or you can make it longer if you want. That's up to you. As long as you have enough yarn to make what you want, go for it. And now I'll show you how to join a new ball of yarn, because sometimes you'll come across a knot. And in this pattern particularly, because it is a wearable garment, I think you want to hide the tails pretty well. So here I'm done with my first cake on my medium-sized poncho here. And I've come to the end of one skein, and I'm ready to join a new cake of mandala. And I'm thinking for this one, you know, I was undecided whether I wanted to start from the dark navy again and go up to the gray. And I think I might do that because it's going to take me just over 2 skeins. So it's going to kind of start from the navy and go up to the gray. Now I'm going to start from the navy again and go up to the gray again. And then I'm going to have a little bit of navy right at the top from a 3rd skein because the medium size takes just over 2 cakes. So I'm going to start by cutting my cake so I can get to that color that I want. And of course, you don't have to do this. This is just me being picky about colors because I like to have dark on the edges of my projects, like the edges of my blankets and the edge of my poncho here. So I'm going to find the kind of mixing point of these 2 grays, the dark gray, kind of navy color here. And I'm going to cut right at the point where it meets this lighter gray. Sometimes it can be tricky to find, but I usually like roll the ball over it until I see this lighter thing. Like it doesn't quite match anymore. So I'm going to take my scissors and cut right at that juncture. So how I'm going to work this, I'm going to start pulling from the outside of the skein, working from the dark navy, and then all the way up until I get to the straw color. And this skein's going to end out kind of this like dark straw color here. And at that point, I'm going to join this skein at the same color and keep working until I get to the light gray. And then I'll have to join a little bit of a 3rd skein here. So I'll show you how to join the skeins as seamlessly as possible, and that is the Russian join method here. So I'll zoom in a little bit, and you're going to need a yarn needle for this. I'm just using a regular yarn needle. So we pick up the end of our piece of yarn that's attached to the project here, and we're going to thread that onto the needle. And we're going to thread the yarn back in on itself a couple of times. This end is looking particularly tatty, so I'm going to give it a little trim. So we got this threaded, and we're going to thread it back in on itself. Maybe 6 times. And we're splitting the plies of the yarn and going through it, you know, 6 or 8 times or so. So just splitting the yarn, going in and out, back and forth. Okay, there we go. We've got it threaded back a little bit. And right up next to the eye of the needle, we have this little loop. And we're going to put our crochet hook on that to hold that for a minute. So we're going to keep this loop on the hook, and then we're just going to pull the needle out, pull it through. And now we just stretch that out, and we've got this yarn woven back in on itself quite a bit. And we can just trim this little end sticking out. Okay, now we've got the yarn we want to join, and I'm going to thread that onto the needle. And we're going to thread this one back on itself as well, but before we do, we're going to run it through the loop that we held on our hook for a second. Now we're going to thread this back and forth through the yarn 6 or 8 times. Okay, that's enough, and now we'll just pull the needle through and give it a nice tug. Oops, sticking to my fingers. And I'm going to trim that tiny little end. Okay, and there we have a beautiful join. It's, you know, you can see it now, but once you've actually crocheted with it, you're not going to be able to see it at all. I mean, you'll see where the colors differ here because, you know, we've got a color change in the middle of the row. But it looks great. You just keep crocheting, double crocheting into each stitch along the row. And as we crochet over this join, we just crochet it as usual. And you can see it here, yes, because it changed from the kind of olive green to the gray. But overall, that's pretty seamless, right? And that is not coming undone, that join. So that's how I've joined all my yarns around knot or joining a new skein. And I'm going to keep working on this poncho, and when I'm done, I will show you how to block it to give it really beautiful drape, and then how to crochet the seam, which is pretty easy. So when you're done with your last row, you've crocheted all the rows on the chart. Don't bind off quite yet. I actually like to leave a little ball of yarn for the seam. You only need a tiny little bit to sew the seam, like, I don't know, less than a yard probably, or maybe a couple of yards. But if you have a couple of yards left, I like to not bind off, and I know it's a hassle to block something with a little bit of yarn attached, but that's just one less end we have to weave in and one less part of the seam to fail. So I really like to make this poncho out of one continuous piece of yarn and just have those last 2 ends to weave in. So I'm going to keep my yarn attached and not fasten off after I have done 45 rows for the medium size here. So I'll see you back here when I have all 45 rows done. Okay, I just finished my last row of double crochet here. 45 rows for my medium size here. And I'm going to show you how I like to keep a little bit of yarn connected here to sew the seam later, but I'm going to block it in between. So I'm saving a few yards here to sew the seam, and all I do to kind of keep this little ball on the end here is I make a little loop and put that around the ball and hold it tight, pull it tight, so that now it can kind of dangle and it's not going to unravel. And now our last stitch, I'm going to put either a stitch marker or a safety pin there to hold it while we measure it out and see if it's big enough and block it if needed. And I think I am going to block this one. So let's go take a look. I'll show you how I usually do that. And you can see I do have most of a cake left from the 3 cakes for the medium size here. So let's go upstairs and measure it and block it. Okay, here's my blocking setup. I'm using these old foam sheets. They were my kids' playroom floor back when my kids were babies. We had a wood floor. So they're kind of shabby looking these days. But if you don't have a spongy blocking mat like this, that's totally fine. You could just lay down a layer of towels. It might take 2 or 3 towels to get enough space. Or you can lay your poncho out on something like a tile floor or mattress or a rug, really anything you want. So we want our finished size of our shawl, the poncho, to meet what's on the chart here for each size. So I made the medium size. I want to get mine to be 23 inches by 72 inches or 58 by 183 centimeters. So you can find this chart in the video description. And I'm going to measure how big mine is right now. It's about 21.5 inches wide. So I'm going to stretch it until it's 23 inches wide across. And let's see. It's about 64.5 inches long. So I'm going to stretch it until it gets to be 72 inches long. So if yours is already this size on the finished size chart here, perfect. You don't even need to block it. But for me, I'm going to need to block it and stretch it a little bit, and that's going to give it that good drape. So first I'm going to get it wet in the tub. Okay, so I filled up my tub with a little bit of warm water. And I'm just going to make sure that everything gets wet. And if your little ball of water, a ball of yarn falls in, that's okay. I'm going to give mine a little bit more slack. There we go. And just make sure you push every part down until you don't see any dry spots. And we'll leave it in there for about 5 or 10 minutes just so it's soaking up a little water. And then we'll let it drain. So we pull it all out of the water, give it some squeezes, get a little bit of the water out. And then I like to lay it on some towels that I have laid out. So I'm just going to kind of stretch it out on the towel. Like that. And then I'll start rolling it up in the towel. And then we have this little kind of log. And I just step on it, kind of squeeze some of the water out. All right, then we can go lay it out on our mats. All right, we can get rid of the wet towels. Lay those out in the sun to dry. Now we just spread it out. Okay, if you have it on a hard surface like a tile floor, you're not going to be able to pin it. But if you've got it on a soft mat or some towels, then you can use pins like these little T-pins that I have here. These are great. I got these on Amazon. And I'll see if I can find a link to them. And the next step up, that's like a little bit fancier, are these knit blocking combs. And I really love these. They're great for getting a straight edge. And I used to have two. I do recommend if you get two, but I lost one. So I'm going to use a combination of the combs and the pins. But first I want to use my tape measure and see if I have gotten out to that 23 inches by 72 inches that I was looking for. So here I'm at about 22 inches. Let's see on the other end. about 22 inches. So I'm going to stretch it a little bit wider to get to 23. Let's see if we're at 23 yet. Just about. I need to stretch it a bit more. All right, let's check. It's not exactly even yet, but okay, we got our 23 inches on the width. Now I need to see if we are going to reach our, let's see, 72 inches on the length. Okay, we still need to get quite a few inches on the length. So I'm going to spend a minute, keep straightening out, and kind of opening up the stitches until I get to 72 inches. Okay, one last check. Got 23 inches. And 71 inches. So I need to stretch it out just a bit more to really get that length. Okay, so if you're just spreading it out, that is fine. It is going to shrink back up a bit if you don't pin it down. So I'm going to put a few pins down to maintain this 23 by 72 inch rectangle I've created here. So I like to pin down the corners. And you can go along and kind of straighten the edges up as you go. Now I'll do the other side with my T-pins. All right, and now that is it, and we will let it dry for a day or two, and then I'll show you how to sew the seam. Just one little seam, and we're gonna use yarn that we left attached, or you can always attach a new yarn. So now just be patient. Try not to step on it. Mine's right by my side of the bed because there's nowhere else in this house that's like just my little space. So we'll tiptoe around it for a day or two, and I'll see you back here when it's time to sew the seam. Okay, we're going to use this beautiful old log as my table because my kids are home and it's too loud in the house. So here's how you finish it. This would be your end triangle that you're finished working. You're going to fold it in half, and you will have the end of your yarn here if you left it attached, and if not, you can attach your yarn with a slip stitch just on the very edge right here to one of these edge piece stitches, and the rest of it's folded in half. And we're going to mark a spot from the folded edge over here 12 inches in, and this is going to be 12 inches no matter what size you're making. Let me move it down a bit so you can see the edge here. So about 12 inches in, I'm going to mark these stitches right here together. Let me find my little stitch marker. Okay, so about 12 inches in, no matter what size you're making, I'm going to put my stitch marker, you can use a safety pin, just through those stitches on both layers there. So let's zoom in, and we're going to start crocheting our seam here. So we're just going to sew from where we're starting. We're going to slip stitch. I keep saying sewing. We're going to slip stitch till we get to that spot. So attach new yarn if you need to, and we're just going to stick our hook into the very first stitch on both sides. Grab the yarn, pull it through both of those stitches and the loop on the hook. So that's one slip stitch. Then we go into the next stitch here. Put the hook through the stitch on the front layer and the back layer. Yarn over and pull it through and pull through the loop on the hook. Now into the third stitch. Just slip stitch it together. Zoomed in a little more because I realized you probably couldn't see too well there. So when we're slip stitching here, we're just inserting our hook through under both loops of that first layer, under both loops of the stitch of the second layer, and then yarn over and pull it through until you just have one loop on the hook there. So that's slip stitch, and it just makes a nice tiny little seam. So this seam that's showing, I like to keep this on the inside of my garment. I could show you on the pink one here. You do see a little bit of a raised line, but I think that's nice. It's a relatively flat seam. So I'm going to keep on going on down the line here. Slip stitch into each stitch. So how many stitches you are going to be in your seam depends on the size you're making, but the neck hole should always be about 12 inches. This is a fairly easy pattern to customize. If you wanted to make one that's like kid size or larger than 4X, you can just add more stitches in each row and add more rows. So, and then as far as using other yarns, this would work with other yarns. You may just have to do a little experimentation to figure out how many stitches you need in each row and how many rows total to get to the finished size that's listed on the charts for the pattern that are in the free crochet pattern PDF on Ravelry, and I'll try to put the size information in the video description as well. So we're just matching up stitch for stitch. Slip stitches do have a tendency to get kind of tight, so resist the urge to really yank here and just keep it nice and easy. Coming to our last couple of stitches here. Can you hear the trees creaking in the wind? Oh, I love it back here. Okay, so where I put my stitch marker, you might be able to see it doesn't exactly line up. I'm like kind of one stitch off on each side, so we can just get rid of the stitch marker. And I'm going to work at the last stitch of the seam and cut my yarn. And I'm going to fasten off. And there we have it. Now all we have to do is just weave in the end. And the end at the very beginning, the yarn tail from the very beginning. So I like to just thread that yarn end on a yarn needle and thread it back into the seam itself a couple of times. So it helps if you have kind of the same color of yarn for your last row in your seam, help kind of hide that. And then I'm just going to go back in this direction a little bit and just kind of wiggle this seam around. And just because it is the neck hole and it's going to get some kind of tension on it, I'm going to just weave it back in even a third time just to make sure that when we're washing this, it's not going to come out. And I would wash it on gentle and just kind of lay it flat to dry. So there we go. Now we can just trim the end and flip the poncho the right side out. And I'll show you what the finished seam looks like over here. Pretty invisible, right? This is our seam. You can really only see it from the inside, so I'm going to wear mine with this side out. And that is it.